let's go ahead and move on to the latest news with regard to deportations. We have new ICE tactics practically every day. We can put these images up on the screen. They're now camping out outside of asylum hearings. This is D0, guys. Camping out outside of asylum hearings, and then, you know, the minute if a case is dismissed or whatever, they just, you know, I don't know why these, like, the masking of these agents of the state is deeply disturbing to me, and that is a common trend now. Actually, Ken Klippenstein did some reporting on exactly this, and even in photos, they're blurring their face or they're turning around backwards so you can't see their faces, et cetera. But this woman was asked, how long were you here for? She said, a year. Then they say, were you guys given any type of process? She says, yes, a process of asylum. And then she says, I had my first court hearing, and she goes on, they dismissed my case. So her case is dismissed, and then she's just swept right up by ICE. Let's put the next piece up on the screen. This was a significant result in the court system here. A judge has said directly that the Trump administration is violating their court order with this deportation flight to South Sudan. I'll go ahead and read you this. This is after a deportation flight with 8 migrants left Texas, reportedly intended for South Sudan. This week, a federal judge on Wednesday ruled the Trump administration had violated a previous order. U.S. District Court Judge Brian Murphy in Massachusetts said at a hearing the administration had failed to adhere to an injunction he issued in March that prevented people from being sent to countries other than their own without opportunities to raise fears of persecution or torture. And South Sudan, not in a good state right now. You know, there's a State Department warning for Americans to avoid South Sudan. I think our diplomats have been pulled because of safety concerns. And this is where it appears, the government didn't really want to give up this information, but it appears that these migrants were sent. And the judge even went, Ryan, so far as to say the department's actions are unquestionably violative of this court's order. So no ambiguity, and raised the possibility even of outright contempt.
Yeah, this is what contempt is for. There was an order in place, and they clearly had contempt for it. Their argument is that these are terrible, murderers and other criminals. You know, if you can't, why can't they figure out a way to do this legally? If it's true, if you've got a murderer here who's here illegally, you can figure out a way to deport them. If you can't, go to Congress and say, look, we've got a murderer here illegally, and you know, these judges aren't allowing us. We need better laws on the books. Nobody is going to object to that.
It would not be any sort of a problem. First of all, murderers should serve their sentence before they, you know, are released into whatever country you're talking about. But second of all, there's literally not a single politician who would object to a murderer who's here illegally getting deported somewhere. Yeah. And it would not be a difficult process to play out. But you ask the question, why don't they do this the lawful way? I mean, that is part of the point, right? They want to test the bounds. They want to outright defy the Constitution and these judicial orders that have been issued, and see how far they can go and see what they can get away with. Yeah. I mean, that is a key part of their strategy here. The other thing that's in this budget that just passed is a huge increase in funding for ICE that makes it, I think, the largest funded federal law enforcement agency in history. So, you know, those are... You're getting the police state, you're getting the, the military expansion, and you're getting the tax cuts for the rich. So far, they have not been able to achieve deportation numbers that are even like commensurate with what Obama, deporter-in-chief, was able to accomplish. They're trying to secure the resources to be able to do that. But in the meantime, they want these displays of lawlessness and cruelty to substitute for that, and then to encourage people to self-deport. That's effectively what's substituting for, you know, actually following process, or God forbid, going through Congress and actually, you know, passing laws that help you accomplish the outcomes that you want, which, as we've discussed before, I think Democrats would have absolutely gone along with at the beginning of this administration. Now I think it would be a bit different. And
I don't know what numbers we're going to have available, but it's probably going to work to some degree. You know, I think, you know, within immigrant communities, they have successfully struck, you know,
people are
very loud chords
afraid.
of fear. Yes, they're definitely afraid, and some are going back. At the same time, they are trying to arrest and detain people as they're leaving, which is counterproductive to the whole idea. Like that, this is a bizarre trend where people are suing for the right to be able to leave freely, and then DHS is going to court trying to say, no, we want to be able to detain you and then deport you. Detain you indefinitely and then deport you at some point down the line.
Wow, I hadn't seen those cases. That's wild.
Which is a real problem with the private detention facility,
right? Because
situation.
They profit,
right? And now they're going to have this massive budget, which is going to create a lot more profit. And there isn't any money in somebody just buying a ticket and going home.
Right.
Like the money is in hiring people to go catch them, lock them up, and then guard them indefinitely.
Right. That's very dark, but very good point. Let's put D2 up on the screen because this really gets to the heart, too, of what's going on here. So there was a memorandum that came out from the administration, from the intel community that said, like, basically, okay, we're not being invaded by Tren de Aragua, and specifically debunking the alleged connection between the Venezuelan government and this gang. And this is a problem for this administration because that is the pretext for which they used to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. This is supposed to be used in wartime or in times of an invasion. So they said, we're being invaded by Tren de Aragua. Preposterous. And the Venezuelan government is directing this invasion. So they fired the people who drafted the original report. And then they did this rewrite from Joe Kent. And he has now been caught directing them to manipulate the outcome of this report. So let me read you a little bit from this article. They say new emails document how a top aide to Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, ordered analysts to edit an assessment with the hope of insulating President Trump and Ms. Gabbard from being attacked for the administration's claim that Venezuela's government controls a criminal gang. Quote, we need to do some rewriting and more analytic work so this document is not used against the DNI, that's Tulsi, or POTUS. Joe Kent, the chief of staff to Ms. Gabbard, wrote in an email to a group of intelligence officials on April 3rd, using shorthand for Ms. Gabbard's position as the president of the United States. Times reported last week that Joe Kent had pushed analysts to redo that assessment dated February 26th on that relationship between Venezuela's government and the gang, Tren de Aragua, after it came to light that the assessment contradicted a subsequent claim by Mr. Trump. Disclosure of the precise language of Mr. Kent's emails has added to the emerging picture of a politicized intervention. But remarkably, even with them cooking the results of this assessment, they still weren't able to totally validate. Like they couldn't go far enough to actually validate the claims that were made in the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. So even with them doing their absolute best to insist we are invaded by Tren de Aragua and it is the Venezuelan government that is directing the, whatever's going on in an Aurora, Colorado apartment building or whatever, even they were not able to fully make those claims.
Right. And also, if their argument is there's an ongoing invasion, the invasion's over. So that's a problem, too.
Yeah, Emily's made that point, that she wanted to ask the administration about, okay, well, the border crossings are genuinely significantly down. So are we being invaded or are we not being invaded and the problem solved? Because you can't have both.
I guess you could argue we've been invaded and you have to find all the invaders.
I guess that's what they would say.
Yeah. But the other problem they have with this invasion rhetoric is that so much of it was done legally properly within the immigration system. What's his name? Andre, the makeup dude. He made a CBP-1 appointment, had an asylum case open.
Yep.
Was here legally. That's not how an invasion unfolds.
Right.
Invasions, you just crash.
You're not going
at the
through
castle
the CBP-1
walls.
app.
No, that's not.
Or waiting for your appointment at the border.
And we can put up this next element, D3. He was not alone. More than 50, at least, of the Venezuelans who were sent to El Salvador, according to this investigation and analysis by Cato, right-wing libertarian institute, were here legally.
So, and even beyond that, in this analysis, he was actually only able to ascertain the legal status of 90 of the individuals. And out of that 90, 50 of them came here legally. So actually a clear majority of the numbers that he was able to ascertain any information about came here legally. So, it's not a scientific sample, et cetera. But if you
But there were
extrapolate
only,
that
what,
out.
250? How many did they send? Well,
Yeah, roughly 250.
It's not a ton.
Yeah, roughly
Right.
250. So if you extrapolate that out, it's very easy to believe that actually a majority of the people who were sent to a foreign dungeon, potentially for life, came here legally and committed, we already know a majority committed no crimes.
And as Ben Franklin would say, even if it was just one, it's wrong.
That's right.
And that's why you have due process. So what did he say? I'd rather 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to prison. And that's the founding spirit of our Bill of Rights and our entire kind of rule of law system.
Yeah.
That it is better to protect the innocent.
Yeah. I think the view from the the extremists in the administration, and which is quite prevalent in Republican influencers, is that the Biden immigration policy was illegitimate. So even if you came here, as a Venezuelan, got temporary protected status, doesn't count. Right. You're still, in their view, you're still illegal because they didn't like that procedure, and so it's illegitimate. I mean, this came up during the Haitian situation in Springfield, Ohio. That the vast majority of them were there legally through that temporary protected status program, or had been here. Actually, a number of them had been here even longer, and had over time moved to Ohio. But that was the view, was that even though they had availed themselves of legal channels, those channels were legitimate because they opposed them.
Right.
So.
And so Rick Grinnell, special envoy to Trump in the State Department, returned yesterday from Venezuela with an American who had been held there for a significant amount of time. Grinnell has been. This is not the first American that Grinnell has gotten out of detention in Venezuela and maybe some other countries as well. He's also been in active negotiations with the government there that I guess we technically don't recognize, but clearly we do. He did an interview yesterday on his way back with Steve Bannon, saying that the U.S. is not out trying to enact regime change all over the world. Then this was in the context of the Maduro government in Venezuela.
Not all over the world, just in South Africa.
Oh, just in South Africa. And so we put this next element up on screen, a scoop from the Miami Herald. This is D4. U.S. secretly negotiating deal to let Venezuela sell more oil if it takes more deportees. And this is actually where diplomacy does play a role in our immigration policy. Like, let's imagine that this is phrased in oil terms, because that's how we understand our diplomacy. China and Russia have been making overtures towards Venezuela. Their oil industry is practically shut down because of sanctions and the amount of the disrepair that it has fallen into. It's not the easiest oil to refine, apparently, and so it requires significant investment and upkeep, and that's been impossible under sanctions. And so the idea here is that the U.S. would move towards normalizing relations with Venezuela. In exchange, we'd get a bunch of oil, and then when you have normalized relations with a country, your immigration policy works more fluidly. Like if, for instance, there's a French person here who overstays their visa, and they get caught and they get a deportation order, France takes them back. We're allies with France. We have normal relations with them.
Yeah.
We don't with Venezuela, which is why, and we don't have normal relations with so many countries around the world that we are bullying, because it's just what we do. And so then we have to we don't have to, but then they choose to send them to El Salvador or South Sudan, or they call up Libya, and whoever claims to represent Libya at this point, can you take them? Hey, Somaliland, you want to be recognized as a country? Oh, okay, well, you have to take a bunch of people from Bolivia because we can't send them to Bolivia because we tried to coup their government and we don't have good relations with them. So if you want a rational immigration policy, it would require normal diplomatic relations with other countries, not being a thug in your region. So I actually wouldn't jump on Grinnell for that. Like if Grinnell can create normal relations with Venezuela, then yes, if there are people here who are getting deported, Venezuela would then accept them.
I'm sort of confused by this, though, because Venezuela has accepted deportation flights, but perhaps it was on more of like an ad hoc basis. Because this is one of the key things that was key details of the Venezuelans being shipped to El Salvador instead. Apparently, prior to that flight to El Salvador, Venezuela had said, yes, we'll take, deportees from the U.S. And there have been subsequently flights that have left and brought deportees to Venezuela. But like I said, maybe that was more ad hoc, and this is meant to be a more like durable, long-lasting relationship. It's also funny because apparently Maduro, they have an analyst here who says he wants a deal similar to the one granted to Syria. So he's looking for he's like, okay, well, you could do it with them.
Why not?
This former Al Qaeda guy. Surely I'm not that bad, right?
He literally can't. Nobody who could be as bad as the Al Qaeda guy. I mean, the former Al Qaeda guy. Like, I think if we can get along,
strong past.
It's a very good point. If you can get along with him, you can get along with Maduro. I interviewed the Venezuelan foreign minister maybe like a year ago, and he brought up and he mentioned deportations as a place where there could be room for negotiations if in a world where there was normalized relations. But yeah, they certainly will take some, and certainly if they're political opponents, Venezuela's happy to take them.
Yes, they said
and
the U.S.
and then beat them up and put them in their jails.
Right.
Yeah.
The U.S. position, according to this other analyst, said they argue Maduro can become a pro-American dictator. So,
I mean, he would not be the first South American, pro-American dictator.
Yeah,
so, sure.
To fit the mold. So anyway, interesting. We'll see what develops there. But I mean, it would make sense that they're using those deportation flights as leverage to try to roll back some of those sanctions and, secure oil sales on a more permanent basis.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.